I think over the next 10 years, we've got lofty goals, but a lot of people are like, oh, you're looking to conquer the world. And I'm like, no, we're looking to just, make an impact on the world around us. Back then, marketing really was frowned upon in dentistry. It was a very traditional industry where healthcare is not a commodity to be marketed, but yet I saw patients out there looking for information. And if they were out there looking, I wanted to be a source of information, education for them. So we were one of the early practices, certainly in our region, to lean into marketing back in those days.
Dr. Greg Toback, so good to have you on the show. I'm really excited. We spoke at the Small Giants Summit, but when we did talk, it was about this journey that you've been on. You noticed that private equity was moving into the sort of dental space, acquiring practices, and you decided to do something different. And I've been really excited to have this conversation with you. So welcome onto the show.
Thank you so much for having me, John. This is a real great opportunity, and I love our conversations we've had in the past and look forward to this one today.
Awesome. So before we got started, we were talking about how you got to this point, and I sort of thought that it happened at about 2008, but it actually started a bit earlier. Maybe just for the audience to kind of bring them up to speed with how you kind of landed up where you are now, founding Resolution Partners. Give us a bit of the background and starting out as a pharmacist or studying as a pharmacist.
Yeah, I was a student at St. John's University on Long Island, New York, studying to be a pharmacist. And I was working in a pharmacy, in a family-owned, multi-location pharmacy on Long Island. Loved my job. But the pharmacy industry was just starting to consolidate. And this is, the late 80s. And there really wasn't the big business of national pharmacies the way they are today. So I went into pharmacy school actually thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool to have my own apothecary, a corner apothecary, and get to know patients? And now I'm working in this pharmacy called Genevieve's Pharmacy. And one evening, I'm working late with Rich, who is one of the pharmacists that befriended me. And Rich said, Greg, pharmacy is changing fast. And this pharmacy one day will be owned by a national company, and it will be open 24/7. And I almost laughed, with a thought like, this pharmacy is going to be open 24 hours a day. Like, that sounds crazy. But Rich had a view of the future that I didn't understand. And he was right. That pharmacy today is owned by Rite Aid and is open 24 hours. And so I saw enough that there were changes happening in the pharmacy industry that having my own pharmacy was not really practical. And so I continued on with my education. It found me in dental school. And once again, I had this desire that one day I would own my own practice. And that came to fruition in 1998. And I embarked as a periodontist, a specialist in gum surgery and dental implant surgery. And I began to build my practice. But over the first 10 years in practice, interestingly enough, I started to see the same kinds of trends in distant marketplaces in the big cities, where all of a sudden there was these national organizations emerging that were starting to consolidate the industry. And I thought to myself, wow, are we going to end up exactly where I was when I was in pharmacy school? And that's really what made my antenna go up and really start to study the dental industry and the landscape, the way it was starting to change and what that was going to mean to me in the future.
And this is around 2008. You started to see that the same thing's starting to happen in the dental industry, but you don't move straight away. You kind of had a couple of practices you thought maybe worth acquiring at that time, right? But
Exactly
something happens,
right.
you don't land up doing them. And
So I'm 10 years in practice, and I'm seeing the changes in the dental industry, and I thought to myself, well, maybe it's time to make a move. Maybe it's the time to build a dental company, a multi-location company, and embrace this change and be part of it, and see what I can do to preserve what was really important to me, what made dentistry so special for me. So I was actually looking at acquiring a couple of practices, and I was actually really close to pulling the trigger on that. But for a number of reasons, I didn't. And in retrospect, I'm really glad that I didn't. I wasn't ready. I
Yeah.
hadn't, gained enough experience yet. I hadn't learned enough. I didn't have the financial foundation to do it right. And so I'm glad I didn't. But it was a seed that was in my head, and I was thinking about it often. And I really spent the next 10 years doing a deep dive of the business of dentistry. I really started to study my own practice, to study the levers to push and pull, and understand what created success, what created stagnation, what could accelerate growth. Uh, Back then, marketing really was frowned upon in dentistry. It was a very traditional industry where healthcare is not a commodity to be marketed. But yet, I saw patients out there looking for information. And if they were out there,
Yeah.
I wanted to be a source of information, education for them. So we were one of the early practices, certainly in our region, to lean into marketing back in those days. So I spent a decade really investing myself in the business of dentistry. I started a consulting company to help other periodontists across the country help build successful practices, and had a lot of fun with that. But it all came to a head around 2018. So things seem to be happening in like decade transition.
Decades, 10-year plans, right?
Exactly.
But I mean, it sounds like there was more than, and I'm not saying sort of dentistry is not there's not an entrepreneurial element, but where you were talking about having that kind of corner pharmacy originally, it feels like you've actually got this kind of entrepreneurial itch in you to take something and create something slightly bigger and more exciting and get into the marketing side and kind of that entrepreneurial way of thinking anyway, right?
Yeah, maybe it's part of the clinician in me that I'm a problem solver. And when I see problems, whether they be clinical problems or business problems, I'm just compelled to try to figure out, solutions. And on the business side, those solutions may create ideas or opportunities. It's kind of what always keeps me thinking, keeps driving me, and much to my wife Janine's uh, displeasure, always keeps me thinking because I'm constantly, trying to solve something. But yeah, in there is the secret sauce of finding opportunities. So what happened around 2018 is that national consolidation, and it's
Yeah.
really the industry uses this term DSO, or the dental support organization, which is typically non-dentist owners, shareholders, stakeholders that invest into dentistry and create these multi-location companies. Um, and they had really finally come to our area, and I saw the failure for a lot of our veteran legacy doctors to be able to transition their practices successfully to younger doctors. And these practices were being bought by national DSOs. And inevitably, in most cases, there was a change. And it was a change that shifted from the values that I really treasured about dentistry: the person to person, the trust,
Yeah.
uh, the solidarity of dentistry that created this wonderful community for so many, not just dentists, but for the dental teams that love to participate in that. I saw that at risk. And as a specialist who, my practice was referral based, I was seeing a risk of the referral community in being able to hold on to the values that I had seen over the course of my career. And I was really driven by this desire to preserve what I treasured most about dentistry by building a company. I kind of said back at that time that I can't sit back and watch the transformation of our local dental community. I wanted to shape it. I wanted to shape the
Yeah.
future of our local community. And so in 2018, my number one referral practice, arguably the best practice in our county, there were good friends of mine, two owners, two partners, and they had failed to transition their practice, and they put their practice in the market, and they had three national DSOs who gave them an offer within 48 hours, sight unseen, like big cash. And they came to me and said, we don't want to do it, but it's really our only choice. And 10 years of this fire burning in me, I finally said, that's it. I'll buy it. Don't sell it to them if you don't want to. I'll buy your practice. I will build a future for your practice, and we're going to create a great dental community called Resolute Dental Partners. And that's the work we've been doing for the past 7 years, is building Resolute, which is now a 7 location dental, we call a family of practices. So we are, and what defines us as this family of practices really are a lot of the small giants value systems. We are independent, we're doctor owned, we're doctor led.
Yeah.
We're about building win-win relationships with wonderful opportunities for everyone involved, where no private equity, no venture capital, really trying to build a model that's not just sustainable but transferable for generations to come. And that's our vision.
So that's kind of evergreen sort of approach that you can keep transferring these practices on and on. Is that the thinking?
Absolutely, because I think that's
Okay.
where dentistry, well, a lot of industries end up consolidated is in the transition phase, where you have a small
Yeah.
business owner who has very little options on transitioning that business. But what Resolute is doing is, by a true doctor partnership model, is creating a pathway to be able to recruit doctors who want to take an ownership position and be a partner in a great dental community and in their practice, and then have a career model whereby at the appropriate time they plan for transition, where they will help recruit, groom, train the next lead doctor, and then ultimately transfer that ownership in the same way that we're doing with the partners that we're bringing in.
So I'm curious, what happened, Greg, with the two folks, and what was the reason that the deal fell through? I mean, we were talking when we started the show, and back in the 90s, my business partner's wife acquired a dental practice, so she would go to the bank, get some funding, buy the practice where somebody was retiring, I guess, and pay the bank back, I suppose, take over the practice. What's broken down there? What's happened that they both sort of said it's fallen through? The only option is it because it's a much higher offer, or is it because because it's far more difficult to get that line of credit that young people need, or what's happening there?
Yeah, so the shift in the industry happened as the cost of education rose. The
Mm,
students today, dental students today, are coming out with half
got
a
it.
million
Yeah.
easy. Some of them upwards of $1 million of debt. And so that's an incredible burden coming out of school and starting your life. And most young docs are trying to get married, start a family, and so
Yeah.
they have aspirations personally. And then you had this shift when DSOs started to acquire practices. They were driving up the purchase values. So now all of a sudden, the opportunity for a young doctor to purchase a practice, they were competing against a national DSO that was inflating the sales
Mm,
price of practices. And because a lot of these boomer age owners had
yeah.
heard, hey, friend got, 150% of gross revenue. I think I want to get that. And I'm not faulting them. Like, everyone can pursue whatever is their desire. But what it did was it excluded the ability for young docs to come in and participate in that. And so now a lot of times what happens is a young doc comes out of school, and their employment choices frequently are in the DSOs. But that model is showing signs of cracking as well, because for the past 2 decades, as the DSOs have built momentum, it's really been on their roles of equity that they've been actually profiting from dentistry. But now we've seen a couple of turns, and a lot of these DSOs are now holding these companies and having to learn how to operate them. Um, but the cost of doctor turnover is tremendous.
Okay.
So that's where the cracks come in. And really where I think Resolute, where we're trying to reinvent the model, because you kind of mentioned that your early experiences of going to a dentist, like me too. Like, my first dentist, I remember my mother would drive up to his house, and
Yeah.
his practice was like the first floor of his house, and his wife was cooking dinner, and I could smell whatever she was cooking for dinner while he was cleaning my teeth. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like,
No.
totally have shifted. So years past, the idea of, hey, I'm going to come out of dental school, I'm going to buy my own practice. Today the market is so much more mature, and for a solo practitioner to be able to compete on the market against the technology and the resources of a DSO is very difficult. And so solo practices are definitely at risk in this next chapter, have been at risk. And it's hard. Like, to be a dentist today is really, really hard to be in charge of all the functions, operations, marketing, human resources, finance. For a dentist to do that effectively, they're finding it more and more difficult to do so. And frequently, not even realizing that they're less profitable than if they were to work for somebody as an associate. So building partnerships in practices, and that's kind of our wheelhouse, is building partnerships and practices that are a little bit larger, because there's magic in partnerships.
Yeah.
And, sharing not only the footprint and being able to fill capacity, and an 8 to 12 operatory office is way more effective than having a small, like 3-4 operatory outfit. And then partnering with Resolute, who can really exercise our knowledge and experience in those functions, those key functions like marketing and operations, be able to benchmark our practices and help them understand how they can get more effective and skilled in certain areas. And ultimately being able to do it in a way that all funnels back to patient experience, right? Like, if
Yeah.
we can do that effectively, it is so good for patients. And we don't have shareholders who are asking us to do things that interfere with that doctor to patient relationship. And that's our core, is like, our practices are really like high quality, high level practices. I would be a patient at any one of our practices, or any of my family members, in a heartbeat, because of that community that we've developed together.
I'm, I mean, I'm curious, the way you were talking at the moment as well. You, you have a practice yourself, and you've just been saying that kind of running a dental practice is hard work. Th- what really troubled you about the changes that were going on? Because there's obviously got to be this real sort of sense of purpose, because you're putting in a massive amount of extra work. I imagine when those two fellows sat across the table from you and said, buy our practices, there was a big financial risk there. What's really worrying you about what's going on at the moment? Is it the patient care? Is it the new doctors coming out, or is it community? What's driving this
I think it's layered.
resolution?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's layered, right? We know that anytime there's layers in a system, and each of those layers has their own point of view and their own interest, right? They're a stakeholder in their own interest. By the time it gets down to the end user, which in this case we'll call the patient, there can be a lot of forces at play that are not even evident to the patient. And so when and I really believe that the best dentistry, I mean the best healthcare in general, is when there's no barriers between the doctor and the patient, right? Like we can have a relationship. There's no forces, there's no influence around us other than what is in your best interest and how can I serve you. And
Kind of back to
as
the old way that dentistry was, before you, as you're saying, you were kind of somebody, that
exactly that
relationship that we had. Yeah.
that's what made these legacy doctors so amazing, right? Like, but they were owners as well, though, so they knew the full deal. Like, it was
Yeah.
important to be able to run a practice, and we always say like owners behave differently, right? Like they behave because there's so much at stake. It's not just this moment, but it's everything that's happening that's at stake, and they learn to think in almost across time. In the past, they could think in the present, they could think in the future. Whereas,
Yeah.
maybe a non-owner is just thinking like right here today. Um, and so there's magic in ownership, but again, I think in the DSO model, what we were seeing is that even though they say, oh, you can be a partner, or oh, you can have clinical autonomy. This is a very famous saying right now in DSO. It's like, oh, you have clinical autonomy. And if you talk to most dentists who are promised clinical autonomy, they say, like, no one's going to sit over your shoulder and tell you what to do. But at the end of the day, there are forces at play within the practice that are happening from non-dentist ownership that are coming in to influence the way that care is delivered. And I think that's the issue. So one of the things that I'm really proud of over the years is I've developed a study group in our area, and it's made from all different dentists, and many of them outside of Resolute Dental Partners, and
Yeah.
it's this incredible collaborative community. And that was actually what happened in 2008, John. Was I was sitting at one of our study group meetings, and I was looking at all the doctors in our study group and thinking like how incredible each of them are, and most of them were owners of their practices. And I said, this right here is at risk. Like, I don't think that the next generation is going to have this number of independent owners that are these legacy doctors that are so invested and engaged in their practice, in their patients, the way these guys are, these and women. Um, and I thought in 2008, I was like, wow, if I could do something to preserve this, but be able to compete in the industry in the future, like how cool would that be? And that's where the idea was born, was right there in that moment. And so now bringing it full circle is, our model really is to recruit um, top level talent with our clinicians, and then offer them career opportunities to be true equity partners, stakeholders, that understand like what partnership is, that they go on a journey to not only understand the finance of running a practice, but also the leadership aspects of leading their people, their teams, leading other young dentists that are going to come in and be under their guidance. So that's the cool thing, is that in the past, dentists would have to try to wing it on their own. And most dental partnerships failed. It was way easier to just be a solo practitioner. I'm evidence
Rather
of
than get
that.
into.
Yeah. I have a failed partnership from years ago. It's really difficult, dental partnership, because we have no models. There's no standard
Yeah.
model, that, but today, like, we have a lot of clarity of how we walk a dentist through that, their opportunity from the time we're recruiting them to the time that we're working with them in the learning years, and then ultimately leading up to a partnership stake where we are signing on the dotted line, and we're bound together by a true partnership.
It's such a good point. I think in most businesses, partnerships can be a real challenge unless you kind of get to sort of the hygiene factors and the agreements and everything sorted out and the cultural issues. And I can remember myself going through partnerships and walking into the lawyer's office and Let me guess, Sean, you've done it again. You've gone in a partnership and haven't come to do the contracts properly and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like it's one of those things that partnerships, but I can imagine a dental practice as well as very difficult. What's the model for Resolute now? I mean, are you acquiring existing practices and kind of the doctors in those practices ultimately kind of phasing themselves out over time and new doctors are coming into those practices, or how does the model work and how are you scaling it?
Great question. But I'm going to go back real quickly to something you
Okay.
just said. And that was like, trying to create partnerships when we go to our lawyer. One of the best things that happened to Resolute and myself was we hired a CFO. His name is Brandon Culp. We hired him 3.5, almost 4 years ago. And he is a partner guru. I mean, just a master of understanding what goes into crafting a true partnership and all the ways it could go wrong. Um, and so he always says that the way dentists do partnerships would be the equivalent of like you're dating someone and you're in a deep relationship now. You really like them and you're like, hey, we should get married. And they say, yeah, that's a great idea. And you're like, okay, hang tight. Let me go to my lawyer. And then the lawyer says, let me tell you all the ways this is going to go wrong. And then we're going to write a prenup that's going to protect you from anything happening so you have zero risk that anything can happen to you. And then you go back and hand that to your fiance. And it's like, well, this doesn't really feel like a relationship, and so
Yeah.
that's what we hire people to protect us to then craft these partnerships, as opposed to what we do is totally the other way around. Is like, if we're going to be partners, you and I are going to talk. Like, number one, why do you want to be a partner? Why is that important to you? And then, why do I want to be a partner with you? Like, what's in it for me? And let's get that on the table and make sure that we're in alignment. And then let's talk about, like, what do you expect out of this partnership, and what are your expectations of me, and then what are my expectations of you in this partnership, and what's our ultimate goal. And so a lot of times partnerships historically have just been trying to achieve like one goal, and it may be a golden handcuff, like, I don't want you to leave me because you're in this practice, I got to do something to keep you here.
Yeah.
um, that doesn't lead to like a healthy partnership. um, and people just end up kind of just trying to stand each other long enough to get what they want out of it. It may be transition, like, oh, I got to bring you in as a partner because one day you're going to need to buy this thing out from me. Again, like, not really a partnership. So
Yeah, it's more of a
so
transactional kind of
very
relationship, right?
transactional,
Yeah.
very transactional,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so what we really try to do, so you asked, like, what's our model. Well, what got us here is not what's going to get us there. So what got us here was, you're absolutely right, we acquired wonderful legacy doctors that really didn't want to see their practices go the DSO route, and they trusted me to take care of the very thing that they spent their entire career building, their teams that
The
they cared
patients they
for,
care about. Yeah.
patients that they cared about. So they trusted me to take care of that. And then um, we recruited, great successor doctors who came in, and we trained them to then become the lead doctors in those practices. So that's been the model that got us here. But really, where we're leaning into now is, because we're a growth centric company. It's like our number one core value is growth. And so finding growth minded doctors who are on the earlier side of their career to mid career, who, really have felt like they want to bring their practice to another level, but it's just a big lift to do it alone. And to partner with us, can accelerate that and break through that ceiling that they've been feeling. So really, that's where we are today, is looking for true partnerships with doctors that have a lot left in the tank, who want to be free, want their energy freed up to do what they're most passionate about, but they've been bogged down with going through, a million resumes in this tortuous labor market.
Yeah.
you know we've got an amazing HR department that is phenomenal at hiring. Like, to take that burden off of dentists, like frees them up to lean into clinical care and team building and culture and all the things that dentists love to do. Um, so that's really the next chapter is, and we've kind of gone this past 2.5 years. We've slowed down M&A, really worked on our model, solidified our partnerships, and said, okay, let's get this right before we go on to this next chapter. Because again, our foundational tenet is that we are independent. We don't want to do anything that would put us at risk of having to look for outside support in the form of PE or venture capital or otherwise. Like, we want to build this, hey, you and I can partner together, and we could build a really viable business, and we could do that again and again. And we could control our destiny and our future.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned culture there as well, and I imagine you're acquiring these different practices, and they come with sort of slightly different cultures. How do you deal with integrating those and aligning everybody with the purpose of where Resolute's going as you acquire those businesses, or do they have some cultural autonomy?
Yeah, it's really an interesting part of the story, because I'm a big culture person, right? I love team building. I was
Yeah,
very proud of the culture that I developed in my core practice, Shoreline Periodontics, where I see patients. And so when I started Resolute Dental Partners, I thought that we would have this overarching culture, and we'd build this amazing Resolute team. And again, 7 years in, I've made a complete 180 shift, right? That originally it was about Resolute and the ability to support and influence. And now it's really about recruiting uh, doctors and leaders who are aligned with our core values, which I gave you one: growth, dedication, integrity, and kindness. Like, that's Resolute Dental Partners. And if you go to any of our practices, you'll see evidence of those four core values. But how they play out is really different in each of the practices, because you have different personalities and each practice has its own feel. Why? Because you've got a lead doctor who is their own person. And so rather than trying to stamp a culture on them, we encourage and want them to have the freedom to
yeah,
exercise a culture from within. And so there's a tribe, there's many tribes within the tribe, right? Like, and that whole concept of tribe. When I tried to have a single tribe, I realized that what I was doing is making people feel almost excluded, that they, somehow they were on the outside, and we were the big bad. Everything I didn't want to be, Jean. Everything I
yeah.
didn't want to be was what they were viewing me to be. Was like the big bad company that.
So the big, yeah,
And I just got to I was like, holy cow, I totally got this wrong. Like, we just need to encourage our teams to, we need good leaders, right? And those good leaders have to make those core values come to life in their own practice. And when they do that, each of those teams develops their own culture, and they have to work on building team health. And we measure team health across the board. We could benchmark practice to practice. So if there's an issue, we can talk about it and say, hey, let's talk, let's huddle up here. We're partners. Like, let's huddle up and talk about team health in your practice. And maybe we can have you talk to another doctor who experienced the
yeah.
same thing, and give you some idea, or your business manager can huddle up with other business managers who experience the same thing and get some ideas. So that's how we accelerate and empower one another. But at the end of the day, like, they get to lead their team, and they have the autonomy to do that how they see fit. And as long as we measure three KPIs, right? We've got a million KPIs. Dentists love data, like, we high detail people, right? So back in the day, I used to get a monthly report that was like, an inch. Like, I
So
couldn't.
now you got down to your 5 metrics. So you one of those things that you need to be stuck on a desert island.
right? Like three things that matter. And the first one is patient experience.
Yeah.
Like what are patients saying about us? And in there is the standard of care, right? Because if our dentistry is really good, it's successful, it's predictable, it provides patients with the solutions they're looking for, then we're hitting our standard of care, and it's bleeding down a patient experience, as well as all the things that happen between the lines from the time they walk in the door, pick up the telephone, all of that. Patient experience. Second one is team health. Is the team healthy? Like, and without a healthy team, you can't deliver that patient experience. And so we measure team health through, twice a year through anonymous surveys. We do it in other ways with, we call it the Resolute check-ins. So we're constantly measuring team health, trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our teams who are pouring their heart and souls into patient care every day. And then the third one is the obvious one, but obviously an incredibly important one, and that's profitability.
Yeah.
Like we could have every success on that scorecard, but at the end of the day, if we're not a profitable business, like what are we doing?
Yeah.
And if we've got to
And
be
this wouldn't be
profitable,
possible, right? Without the profit, you can't make this happen. You can't. Yeah.
we got to want to
Yeah.
invest into our patients and technology. Want to invest back into
People.
our team and growth opportunities. Yeah, so those are the three things that matter. And if our doctors are hitting those three, then they could do it any way that they want. That's upholding our core values, and they each do it differently, uniquely, which is exciting to see.
What's the vision from here? So you've got. I mean, we're seeing this happen in so many industries where in your industry it's the DSO, but in everything from marketing to you name it, there's private equities coming in and getting involved somehow. You've
Mhm.
you've taken a look at a situation. You've, I think, kind of worked on what does our business model look like, and you sounds like you've figured out a business model that's viable. I suppose the next stage is how you scale that. But what's the vision for the next kind of 10 years or so? Where are you taking this?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Now that we've really done the hard work of figuring out the model, of our team gaining the experience um, to be able to articulate how we support our practices and how we accelerate our practices, now we're ready to scale it, and we're going to scale with intention. Um, we're not just looking for any practice. We're looking
Mm,
for practices that truly share the vision that we have and want to partner with us. So we'll do it methodically. We're a geographically dense family of practices, meaning that we have our practices are all in southern and eastern Connecticut and Rhode Island. So we don't buy practice in Ohio because we really believe in the human touch, and it's impossible. Now, by the way, that's what most DSOs do, right? Like they're headquartered in Dallas, but they own practices in Connecticut. Um,
mm,
and anyone could do the accounting on a practice. You don't need a DSO to do that. So when crisis happens, we have a team that's on the ground that can come into a practice and really help them in measurable, tangible ways. And so we're building our next practice is just a stone's throw from the furthest one that belongs to our family of practices right now. And so we're looking for the right practices to team up with. And I think over the next 10 years, we've got lofty goals. But a lot of people are like, oh, you're looking to conquer the world, and I'm like, no, no, we're looking to just make an impact on the world around us.
yeah.
And as long as we can do it and feel like that we're effective at what we're doing, then we'll go on and we'll do more of it. But if we have to slow down again and pause and grow, then we'll do that. I think that's going to be our formula for sustaining it. And we've got a great, as well as the next 10 years, working on the model for succession, like whether it be me or anybody else. Some hard questions, we're already answering them, and it's built into our model. Like, fortunately, I think I could go away tomorrow, and I think Resolute Dental Partners can stand. But we're going to strengthen that. We're going to
Yeah.
spend the next years really strengthening the position. Um, Back, in the day when I was thinking of doing this, I said I want to preserve dentistry, because what if my kids want to be part of dentistry? Like, what'll be left for them? And it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing that I would say. I had no idea, my kids were young at the time, if my kids would have any interest in dentistry. Um, but funny enough, as it turns out, my oldest, Austin, is an MBA, and he's on our business team. He's our business growth director. My daughter is a fourth-year dental student at Dalhousie University and applying for residencies right now. And my youngest is applying to dental school. So all three of them, see their future in dentistry, as it turns out, which is pretty cool. But when
Yeah.
I think about like what I want for my children, um, they allowed me to think about affecting the next generation, because it's, the entire company are my children, whether they be the next generation of dentists, whether it be our team members. I really am compelled to preserve what is so special about this industry, and this opportunity that we have to make an impact on our community. And I want them to be energized the way I've been energized by it. So that's what I'm hoping for Resolute.
Love it. It's one of those conversations that's been coming up more and more as I talk to leaders in the small giants community, and I'm sure, yeah, outside there's more businesses like this, but that they're kind of the beacons for other businesses. I think of Eric Rieger talking about trying to close the gap between the have not, the wealth gap. I was on with Sherry from Rail, who was one of the original small giants, and she talked about their business being kind of a beacon on a hill, or a lighthouse on a hill. And I feel like Resolute's another one of those beacons that this is what the change looks like. This is what it could be, instead of going that DSO route. And I just feel like the more beacons there are around the world, and then kind of bringing it down to our children, that our children grow up in the kind of businesses that we love, that we saw, and that we'd love to see them in. That's just something that's really moving. Listening to you talk about your children and them going into dentistry, whether they kind of coming into Resolute or they're doing their own thing, it's just that we're preserving and evolving what that used to look like, and making it something that we're we're really glad that our kids are going into, or happy that the kids are going into. I think it's so important, the work you're doing.
I mean, it's been said many times that small business is the heart and soul of America. There's something about the small business, the legacy, the values, that story that it carries. I think it's really important. It provides an opportunity for people to belong to a tribe, to belong to something that they believe in. Uh, and yeah, so I think that's the opportunity that we have, is to create something that holds on to that legacy
Yeah.
aspect, but can compete in a new era. Um,
Yeah.
because together we can build the resources, we could build the intelligence, our ability to grow. Our ability to adapt to technology today is far surpasses what I could have done on my own. Any dentist could do on their own. Like, our ability to evaluate a technology, incorporate it, onboard it, train it, and get it to its effective measure, is pretty cool.
Are you, I mean, part of the model that you folks have, is that kind of avoid taking on much finance, or sort of debt to acquire these businesses, or is it kind of a mixed setup?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few ways that we've done it, but that's one of the ways that really has created mass consolidation of the industry. So, kind of left hand turn here, we can talk about this a little bit. is that there's a lot of dentists, actually, is a great number of them that are very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And as the industry started contracting, there was a great number of entrepreneurial dentists who wanted to create dental companies. Now, most of them had a vision to sell it. I'm going to build X number of practices, I'm going to sell it and, get a payday. Well, that created, so originally DSOs were looking at single practices. And at some point they said, oh, it's a lot faster if we just let the dentist do the consolidating, and then we'll just consolidate them, right? So
Because
what would
I'm
happen?
almost imagining you're becoming quite an attractive acquisition for these more and more as you build this up. But
We have said to many, let's put it this way, we've said to a lot of folks over a dinner, like, thank you, but we're not for sale. Like,
yeah,
fun to talk, fun to explore, but we're not for sale. Like, it's just, and a matter of fact, Jean, I'll share this with you. One of the things that we did that's unique, like, what's our market differentiator? Well, number one, no private equity, no venture capital, um, and true equity stakes for our partner doctors. But the other thing is that, much to the chagrin of our legal counsel, it took us a long time to really navigate this with them. Is we eliminated the drag along clause, which is part of almost every partnership agreement with a majority partner, because we said, hey, like, if we want to be partners with you, if I can still force you to do whatever I want you to do, then we're not really partners at the end of the day.
yeah,
So we basically gave our partners the right to hold on to their equity, regardless. Like, even if I something were to happen to me that I had to sell a share of my ownership of the company, our doctors could hold on to their, or would hold on to their stake, which would eliminate the vast majority of private equity interest. The only person who
okay,
would buy Resolute would be somebody who had the vision that we have, and who says, "I want to carry
gotcha,
on
yeah,
vision that Greg started." So we did that on purpose. Now, maybe it's to, a huge financial loss had I been able to, sell this at 12x EBITDA or something like that, which is not the model, right? Like, that's not the vision that I ever had. It was not for a windfall event down the road. I wanted to build a legacy that could be passed from generation to generation. Um, and in doing that, I had to surrender, the rights of being able to sell the whole thing. Um, but I think it's in that part of that, that's our
yeah,
market differentiator. Like, that's
yeah,
what makes us.
yeah, brilliant. And one of the things I was interested in is, I mean, you have a few family members involved already. What are some of the challenges with kind of bringing family in, or you just really enjoying it? Is it just you're loving it?
I do love it. I mean, it's the true spirit of a family business.
Yeah,
Um, my wife Janine, funny enough,
who I
back
met, I
in,
think, at the
yeah, you
at
met
Summit.
Janine.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
lovely.
yes.
Yeah.
Janine, I asked her, back in, I was probably 2009 or something like that. My business manager had resigned. I needed someone to run payroll. And I asked her, she's a teacher by education. I was home raising our children. I said, hey, would you run payroll once every other week? I said, easy job, like, no problem. And she said, sure, I'll do that. And today she's our director of HR. We have 120 team members across
Wow.
Resolute.
Okay.
She oversees medical benefits, cultural initiatives, like, you name it. Like, she's so invested and involved. Um, this morning, in all transparency, I was out fishing this morning before doing this podcast with you. She was at the office working. So it,
It's,
it's true family business.
you had to come back and do a podcast instead of catching fish.
Uh, but it is challenging to balance.
Yeah.
We have to. We had to learn as a family, to understand what hats we're wearing when.
Yeah.
Uh, that took a lot of learning. It continues to be learning for me. for example, I mentioned that my son Austin, he's 29 years old. He's amazing. He's doing such another one. By the way, again, in a moment of transparency, I asked him last night. I texted him. I said, "Hey, how about an 8 a.m. meeting on the water, and we can catch up and do a little fishing." And he said, "Hey, I hate to be a buzzkill, but we've got a few big things happening right now, and I've got to be on a call with the lawyers in the morning and finish up the contracts for X, Y, and Z." And he's like, I don't think it's wise for me to be out of the office. And I said, "I'm proud of you for being so
No.
responsible. You know where to find me. I'll be on the water." So,
If you
you know,
need me.
have to learn like what hat are we wearing? Like, so with
Yeah,
Austin, to learn like when I communicate with Austin, when we're in our work roles, it cannot be father son, and I mean in the most subtle of ways, right? Like, and it's so hard because the neuromuscular training is I'm dad, he's son, and so we're talking about something business wise, but there might be an inflection in my voice, that I would not have with somebody else.
yeah,
And that's really that stuff matters, and I've had to learn. That's been something I've really had to lean into, and just understand, like, what am I putting out, because obviously I love my son, I love my wife, I love my all my children, um, but I've got to care for them in the business the way I would any of my team members. And if I put on a role that's not appropriate, I could be destructive.
yeah,
So that's been a challenge. Same with my wife Janine. We've had to get really good at trying to draw the boundaries. It can't be 11:30 at night when my head's on the pillow and I'm like, "Oh, by the way, when you get to work tomorrow, like, can't do that."
you've got to have
It's
those boundaries, right? And be very, it just
got to have
becomes too easy. Yeah,
very
yeah,
challenging, but we've gotten better at it. um, and also talking transparently with one another. You can't take it for granted that just because we're family that we know what's on each other's mind. That we have to afford each other the same opportunities to talk openly and candidly the way we would any of our team members. Um, it's kind of one of those things you could neglect it pretty easily, just because you're
yeah.
so close, and you wake up one day, it's like, have we really talked about that? Is like, are we all on the same page? So communication has to be definitely worked on.
Let me ask you one last question in closing. Most of us get into this entrepreneurship game for freedom. What does freedom mean to you?
Mm. I think freedom for me means doing what I love to do for as long as I want to do it, providing me with the life experiences that I desire.
Yeah,
I think if I could have those three things, I'm free. Um, so for me, I chose. There's nothing wrong with those entrepreneurs who look to like build and sell and retire. Um, Not really in my genetic coding. You know, I want to build something for as long as God affords me the mind and body to do it,
yeah, yeah,
to make an impact on the world and the people around me. Um, and Janine and I always say, we're so blessed. We've with the lifestyle that we have. We really, if we could sustain what we've built together and enjoy and have the moments and the time to really be able to live in that moment and enjoy family and our friends and the Resolute family. Um, like, man,
what a good
I'm
life.
fortunate
Yeah.
person in the world, right? Living like a king.
Brilliant.
What can I hope for? So yeah, but to me, freedom is just being able to do more of what I love.
Greg, I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on to the show. I think you're private equity has a role to play. It's really important. But I also think that there are a lot of business owners who kind of in that position at the moment where they're thinking about succession and having different ideas, different options, and even younger folks who are thinking about, how do I get into this? Could I acquire a group, bring something together, do something innovative? Just sharing your wisdom and the journey that you're on is, I think, so useful for our listeners, and really appreciate the time and sharing with us.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me on the show, Jean. It's always great chatting with you, and just love the conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Greg.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Freedom Experience. If this episode sparked something for you, hit the subscribe button, leave us a review, and share it with somebody who cares about building a great company. It helps us to reach more leaders who are ready to grow with purpose. To learn more about how we're growing next generation leaders and value-based businesses, head on over to smallgiants.org. That's smallgiants.org. You'll find practical tools, leadership workshops, and a community of business owners who put people first. That's it from me. See you next time.